factories that's sitting. I'm actually looking across through the window at these factories. So an industrial site that's been here for over 50 years. Our division really started at the time of Thomas Edison. So there's heritage with this company that goes way back. Uh, it makes it somewhat interesting is we are no longer, even though we say we're GE Appliances, we are right now actually GE Appliances, a high air company. 3 years ago, we were bought, actually, excuse me, 4 years ago, we were bought by High Air. And it's really been a good story for us as a company. We're part of a large multinational appliance company called High Air, who has very interesting philosophy about how they run companies and how they execute. So they're very much about running companies in your local market. And also, which I think is important for this conversation, are very much a supporter of making manufacturing where your customers are. So local manufacturing, and they have a theory of what they call zero distance. So what we think as a company that you need to be in touch with your customers, and you need to be able to respond to your customers in a very quick and orderly fashion by being close where you are. So a little bit about myself. My background is engineering. I ran the engineering department here for years. We were at times doing lighting, industrial products. So I'm very steeped in engineering, sourcing, very technical aspects of the business, and new product development. I've been CEO now for 3 years. It's been a good time for our business, but also a very interesting time with COVID and all that. We'll talk a little bit about that during my presentation. So I've got a few slides to share. Jim, if you're there, we're having trouble sharing our screen. It says it's disabled. So everyone, you might see slides and you might not. This is the joy of our digital communication. So if we can't see them, it will be fine without them also. So the first thing I want to talk about is, what is the future of work? And I think that's very relevant to what this conference is about, is how's technology going to change? How is technology going to change work in the future? And then how are we going to be ready for it? And where does education play a role in those technology shifts? Okay, we're making progress on sharing. Okay, if anyone out there, I think we've got the screen up and shared. It's good? All right, excellent. So if you think about technology, I think there's not a really clear view yet on what the future of work is going to be. And that makes it difficult. How are we going to change? You've got students that are early on in their education path, and how are we making sure that we're developing and bringing up the skills and the needed requirements for the future and where they're going to work in their careers. If you think, I've been here actually, I think 30 years. And what I learned in school from a technical education, I'm a mechanical engineer, a lot of it isn't relevant. We started with punch cards. We had to write CNC G code by hand. There wasn't the kind of compilers we have now. So there's certain things that might still, thermodynamics hasn't changed. Some of the things that we had haven't changed, but much has. And how do we stay current? And is what we're teaching the kids today in high school, in college, is it current? The other thing that I think has happened over the 30 years is technical education has really taken a dive. When I was young, there was always a path. Did you want to go to a technical community school, or did you want to, go to a more traditional education? And they were both looked at decisions, not one better than the other. And then over time, I think as they thought manufacturing was going to move out of America, schools stopped investing. They stopped investing in that kind of education. And I think we're seeing some of our problems today as a nation because of that lack of investment in education. But one thing, if I look at jobs, there's this view that robots are going to take over jobs. And it's another thing I think people are looking at, why go into manufacturing? It's going to be replaced by robots. And I have a much different view of what, robotics are going to do for the future of work. And the jobs that I think actually are more at risk are actually the thinking jobs, the jobs that we have in the offices, the jobs that we have outside of manufacturing. Because if you look at, You know, building a robot to think, it's like a chess robot. You don't have to have anything articulating. It's just a computer. It's just a CPU. Building a robot to replace the dexterity of a human being is very difficult and very expensive. And so I think the future that I see is going to be one where we're going to continue to have great jobs in manufacturing, more interesting jobs in manufacturing, but jobs where robots help us. Because if you see, we're at that stage with, you know, anyone that's in a managerial job, you know, we look at a computer and we don't think of as a computer as a robot, but it is a thinking robot and it helps us. And anyone in managerial role, we work hand in hand. Nobody is not accessing data. You know, that's the whole thing right now is, as you know, if you're in a leadership position or any kind of position, engineer, you use a computer to get data, to help you process it, and the two work in unison. It becomes a very powerful combination. That I see as the future of workforce. So some of the low level jobs that really I think are inhumane to work at, okay, they'll be replaced. They're very simple to be replaced by a robot. But I think as we look at the factories that we're building for the future and how do we really get close to our customers, there's going to be a lot of flexibility needed. And humans are great at flexibility, machines are not. And so what I say again is, I do not see jobs being lost to automation in factories and manufacturing, but I do see the skill base change totally on what we need to do to be able to operate and run those factories in a clean and efficient manner. So what does that mean for us? You know, what does that mean on education and how can we support? So at GEA, we really do look at, you know, our involvement in education. So our social outreach is mainly focused on education and how can we make sure that we're developing the skills to build good careers for the individuals that are in school right now. And I think people are starting to really question, you know, they go to college, they get a liberal arts degree, and they come out with a mountain of debt and really no skills that are helping them work in the workforce. And are we really doing the right thing? And are we really guiding our children, these students, in the right areas where they can have good, fulfilling jobs? So in Louisville, Kentucky, we've really partnered with our school system, and I think it's a good example for industry. You know, the picture you see here is at a local high school, and it's Doss High School, that we've, you know, invested and we've built a technical lab that can really help people understand it's not how to do manufacturing. What we try to do is show them the value of manufacturing and how it can be very fulfilling and very interesting. So we partnered with this high school and set up a program where those students can come out on Fridays and work half days, Fridays and Mondays. And so there's in school where they have technical classes, but then they could come out and actually work in a facility and see manufacturing. And I think that's another problem in America is people don't understand and they don't know what manufacturing is, especially when you go to the coast. I originally grew up in Connecticut. And if you talk to people in Connecticut right now, it used to actually be the manufacturing hub of America prior to Detroit. Nobody there knows what manufacturing is. They don't know, you know, how things are actually made. And it's really here in the heart of the country where we still have it. I hope that changes in the future. We need this all over America. But it starts with people seeing that this is a good place to get into. It's a good career. So I think the first thing in education is to get people interested. Because what we have is not many parents understand manufacturing, so they can't encourage their kids. You know, you see the emphasis in America seems like sports. If you were a foreigner and you came to America, you would think that we have thousands of high-paying jobs in sports. The way that you see parents invest and spend their weekends, their time on sports. And everyone knows the reality of that situation. It's a dream. You know, you get probably a portion of 1% that can actually have a fulfilling career in the sports field. And there's zero emphasis on math and science compared to that, if you look statistically, of what we're really pushing our kids into. So a lot of our charter is just that, of showing people this is interesting. I grew up having two parents that were teachers, and I was always interested in building and doing things. But when I asked my parents, you know, what kind of job, they had no answer for me. They never told me to be an engineer. They didn't know what an engineer did. And I think that set me on a path. I got very lucky by having a couple people that started to know me to say, hey, you might be interested in doing engineering. If it wasn't for that, I don't know what I would have been doing right now. I probably wouldn't, definitely wouldn't be where I am. So we've got to make it less by chance. And how do we make it more intentional to make people be able to make decisions and make educated decisions on what is a good career and what is a good thing to do. And so it gets into what's our role? How do we support? And I think a lot of it is we start thinking that, how do we get involved like we did in Doss High School, teaching technical skills? But I think at first we've got to really look back and how do we actually support and invest in public education? Because another problem we have is the public education. And first is if you want to influence what they teach and promote, you got to make sure that first that they can even do the fundamentals. In Louisville, Kentucky, we had to try to get a vote passed. And it went to petition. A lot of people were arguing not to pass it for a tax increase to support education. And you go around all over the nice neighborhoods, and there's sign after sign, vote no on education. And meanwhile, I think we'll talk a little later on social justice, but you see, Louisville, we have a lot of problems. And, there's a lot of people say, how can I help? Well, by having a sign on your front yard that says vote no to supporting our schools probably is not going to help. And if you look at what's really going on here, the last new high school that was built was the high school that Muhammad Ali went to. And that's the kind of investment we've made in public education in Louisville, Kentucky. The high school that is in the West End, where most of the trouble, if you've been watching TV and you see where Breonna Taylor and everyone, the third floor of that high school has been condemned since I think the date is 83. So what do you think a kid walking into a school that has a condemned third floor since 1983 thinks of how we value them and how we value their education? And so first we have to get the hygiene right. We've got to make sure that everyone has access to a good education. It's not just for the elite. And if you do go to, there's a huge private institution here in Kentucky that people spend a lot of money that does have zero technical education in it. So I think we've got to, number one, make sure that all students have access to technical education, private or public, but a real focus on, do we have a good public schools in the areas? And I think these states that have a lot of manufacturing are, if you look at how they rank on an education level, it's not there. And I think that's the first thing. Let's make sure we've got good schools and we can give these students a fighting chance. Once we have that, how do we make sure that we get involved with the curriculum? And that's what we're very involved in is, how do you get involved? Because the curriculum of teachers, and I know this personally from my parents, they don't understand the technical world and where these jobs are going to be. They understand how to become a teacher. They don't understand how to become an engineer. They don't understand how to manufacture and make things. So they need people like us to be involved, to be sitting on school boards, to be talking. I've been on the advisory board for our speed school here at University of Louisville for years. And speed school is our engineering school at University of Louisville. And we work very closely to look at them of what is the curriculum and how do we influence the curriculum. In Louisville, we have a place called First Build, which is an investment from GE Appliances. If you are here in Louisville, we'd invite everyone to come down. It's an open innovation center sitting on their campus. It's mainly manned by students. And in that facility, we design and we build and we sell appliances. So we have students in there. And one of the things, if anyone loves pizza, go online, look at our Monogram pizza oven. It is an amazing product. It can cook a Neapolitan pizza in under 2 minutes. But what's I think more amazing is that is all hand fabricated by students. And the students come in, they stamp the parts, they bend the parts, they QC the parts, they develop how to make a lean assembly line, and they put together and then they final test, UL certify, and we ship those products out. It's a little pricey. It sells for $10,000. But I'd argue it's an amazing job that we've been able to provide for students that's much different than working at Subway making sandwiches. So that's the other thing is, do you give opportunities for students to really start seeing what it's like. At the same time of getting back to influencing the education system, right next to First Build, we call it the Egg, and it's run by University of Louisville. But what we found as we were hiring those students is they really didn't know how to make anything. They might understand how to do calculus. They might understand chemistry. But when you put them in front of a milling machine, when you put them in front of a CNC, they were dumbfounded. And we said, we've got to give these kids the basics early on. So we formulated a program that every engineering student now goes through, where it's a laboratory environment for a course where they're taught how to program PLCs, how to work with Arduinos, how to work with Raspberry Pis. So all these things we've said that can we get that early on? And then I think, when students are in these education fields, they can decide. When I started engineering, didn't know what it was, I ticked off, I want to be an electrical engineer. And then I started seeing that, I really like machining. Why am I being electrical? I switched over to mechanical. And I think a lot of people struggle with finding what interests you, what's going to excite you throughout a career. And I think the more we can find opportunities early on in someone's education to let them find what excites them, is how we can make sure that they're excited, they stay involved, and they continue to grow. So we talk about, I said social justice. This has been a year that I think has shown that, there's a lot more to just education that we need to work on. And this gets back into what I was talking about, public education and making sure that everyone has a chance. The best way to help, we have to help people break this cycle of poverty. We have to make sure that we're bringing the kind of jobs and the opportunities to everybody. And right now, these kind of opportunities, they're not there for everyone. They're not, getting into engineering school takes a high school education that's specific. You need to be successful, and the stats are there. If you walk into your education curriculum without calculus, your odds of success are very, very low. So typically those people will branch off and go into a liberal arts degree or some other degree other than the technical degree. So we've got to make sure that we're giving these kind of opportunities to everyone. And I think all of us that are in areas, you need to get involved. You need to get involved in your schools. When you see an underperforming school, stop looking at it as something to run away from. Look at an underperforming school as something to get involved in, as something to understand. Because a lot, you hear this rhetoric, oh, that's just bad kids. It's not bad kids, okay? And as you get to see, it's kids that don't have the opportunity that many of our children have. And how can you get involved? How can you get to know those individuals? And how can you get to help provide for those individuals the opportunity that we had? And I think realizing that we had privilege, that we had things in front of us. I had, like I said, I grew up in a middle-class family, but my parents were teachers. They valued education. They encouraged me to have continuous education, but that's not always the case. And we've got to be there, and we've got to be able to partner and get involved to leverage it. A lot of us are looking at how do we increase the diversity of our workforce. We've got to get involved where the diverse students are and get involved in their schools and in their education. When you look, where do you get involved, I think is another question. To me, high school is the right spot, because high school, I think, is where we start thinking, when you turn 16, typically we'll go get a job. So you're starting thinking about, what am I doing in school and how is that helping me get a job? And that's the right time, I think, for an intervention to start showing these different opportunities. And I think all of us, if you're looking for things that you can do from a social justice standpoint, one of the best things is education. I think that's really going to be the solve of this. One is educating ourselves to understand that, we are products of privilege, many of us. So do we understand that? And then how do we understand how we can give back and how we can help? And I think everyone on this Zoom call knows the value of technical. I'm preaching to a choir right here, but how can we go out and how can we get involved? How can we go out and how can we get involved with our schools? And companies have a big influence. And I think in Louisville, people do look now to GE. on our involvement in our technical schools, our involvement in our high schools, and our involvement in our universities on how is industry and education together. For example, we have an Edison engineering program. I joined GE through that Edison engineering program. We have one here in Louisville. But if you're an Edison engineer, we have University of Louisville professors come out and you can get a full master's degree right here on site. We pay for that up front. We don't even have tuition reimbursement. So we make sure a lot of these young individuals have cash flow issues. So understanding what is the problem that your young individuals in your company, what your young individuals in your community, what problems and issues do they have, and how can you remove those problems and allow them to have opportunity, I think is what is so important. So that's mainly what I wanted to talk about. I'd love to take a few questions if we have a few minutes.
Hey, this is John Irwin from Michigan Tech. I got a question. What
Yeah,
do you
John.
what do you feel about the mechatronics degrees coming forward? Are you familiar with those, and how do they fit into GE?
Yeah, I'm familiar. I think that's another thing. If you looked in the past, I think, John, and I was part of a problem too. We always looked at, here's the, I'm a mechanical engineer. So we always looked, well, you need to be a mechanical or an electrical. And I think in the future, the degree on the label has to be much less important. It's what is the skill and what do you have? I think we're going to have a future too where degrees won't mean anything. You can learn a lot now just with media. So I think mechatronics is a good degree. We need to look at, if you look at that skill, those people could come online and start, contributing right away. So I think too, as companies, we've got to work with our HR department because HR can many times be very robotic. And here's the classification, and that's what we need. And what we need to do is we need to look at talent. One of the things I've learned at First Build, there's been some amazing students that have a 2.3 GPA that when I see them in a shop and I see them work, the value they can create is incredible. So because someone's not great at grades or has a different degree, we need to look past that and what is the individual and how do we get to know that individual? So I think we have to change a lot of our mindset on what the degrees are. And I think, what you're talking about is very practical and people could come in because when you hire someone now, you have to, as a company, also provide continuous learning. And so we should take an emphasis off of strict rules and look more about what's the skills and how are they going to contribute.
Thanks a lot.
All right, anything else? I don't know, Jim, if we've got time or not.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin, you're fine.
Yeah, so don't be shy. We got a fairly small group, so let's ask anything.
Good morning, Kevin. Thank you for doing this today. Can you discuss the company and corporation's perspective on technology degrees versus engineering degrees, and how you see that changing over time and being how most of our students will have technological degrees, they won't have engineering degrees. So how do they market those to a company like GEA that is engineering heavy?
Yeah, I think and that's probably something we've got to help with resumes, because if you look at coming out with an engineering degree, and Walt, I have to say I wasn't good at this before because I was a stickler of you need an engineering degree. So I think we've got to market more of an education for leaders in these kind of roles of what does that degree have and what's the benefit of it and really understanding it. So I think some is when those students present themselves, how do they present all that practical knowledge? Because a lot is, I think it's different learning styles, it's different interests. It's not different intelligence. And we've got to get that off that these kids are all super smart, and what are the skills that they're coming to work with. So I think we've got to get more involved with companies and their recruiting. I think anyone that, has universities that have co-op programs, et cetera, or companies that hire co-op programs, we need to get with those people that are making those decisions on co-ops to say, hey, you need to give these kids with the technical degree just as even a chance and let them see, let them compete. And I think what we'll find is those kids compete very, very well with that degree. And in many jobs, they're going to compete better because of the practical education they've been given. So I think we've got to educate the companies on really the benefits of that degree more so, because there's a lot of people like me that was running engineering for years that have an engineering degree. And, I'll just be upfront. It's an elitist attitude of, oh, I've got that degree, and why should I hire something else? And it's just like people that went to Harvard or Yale, they want to hire other people. We got to stop this elitism and start looking at the skills of individuals and hiring people that are really going to add benefit and value to a company. Any others? We got to have let's do at least one more question. Anything else? And we can go anywhere other than the election. We don't want to discuss the election unless anyone knows exactly what's going to happen.
I'll jump in with another one. How do you feel as the CEO of a corporation? You have multiple disciplines to manage. You have your technical staff and your non-technical staff. How is management of those people different, especially for a manager with a highly technical background?
Yeah, so one, it's a good question, Walt. I think this is something that needs to change too. I think you get so many corporations are being run by consultants. They're being run by people that have these highfalutin degrees that have no concept on the technical aspects of work. And I hate to say it, but as I get into the CEO role, understanding a lot of the disciplines that I need outside of technology, it's not that hard. Right? The technical stuff is difficult, right? Do you really understand how things technically are done, and how do you evaluate a product? How do you evaluate, your competition? And more companies are in technical spaces being run by non-technical people. That has to change. So I do think there's going to be a future where you're going to get leaders being more and more technical, because I think a technical leader in these fields is going to outperform. And I think that's going to help. Because if you look at me, I'm much willing, when I look at a technical background, I'm much more comfortable with that individual, because I think the thing that we teach people that we don't even realize, it's problem solving. And what does a company need most? Good problem solving skills. And that's true in all these kind of degrees, is we understand how to fix things, how to problem solve things, how to, step through and manage the complexity of getting something done. These other degrees don't have that. And so I think we need to see more leadership being technical. And I believe it's going to happen. I believe, the age of these, generalist CEOs coming out of McKinsey, Harvard, all these places, I think are going to start getting upended by people. People wonder why, you look in our industry, the Koreans are coming on very strong. You get a company like LG. If you look at the Asian companies, they value technical degrees much more. And a lot of us, wonder, well, how are they so effective? How was Toyota able to disrupt the automotive industry? I look at it as because you had generalists fighting technologists, and it's an unfair fight. And I think when companies realize that, the reason I'm CEO right now, let's just be frank, under GE, I wouldn't have been. But I think we've got a Chinese parent now that values the technical capabilities of people, and they look at like, how could you not put a technical person in running a company where you manufacture? They're just astounded and dumbfounded by it. But here in America, they're like, well, how did you get that job? You're an engineer. So we've got these two cultures just totally looking at this thing different. But then you get America wondering, well, why did manufacturing leave? It's like, get a clue, guys, because we have leaders that don't understand it and don't know how to do it. All the advanced manufacturing things of this nation, you look at what happens in Asia, it came from America. We are the manufacturing capital of the world, but we don't think we are. And It's because we have leaders that have no clue, that have never been in a factory. You know, I remember having a conversation with Eric Ries, who, if you haven't read it, he wrote The Lean Startup, unbelievable book. But he was preaching how we need to do lean startup in manufacturing also, like software. He had never stepped foot in a manufacturing plant. I showed him how to vacuum form and how to mold. He had never seen it before. I said, what right do you have to tell us how to do things when you are clueless on the process of how to make anything? That's got to change.
I have a question
Yeah, Dan.
and a follow-up statement. I would say educators who have never stepped foot trying to tell us how to do technical education is the same thing.
Exactly.
What about the new push for Industry 4.0, smart sensors, data analysis, SCADA? Where do you see that filling a role? Is that something that education needs to pivot to be more forward-thinking about?
Yeah, Dan, I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. In the future, these jobs are going to be just like, you know, we see it. If you're on Wall Street, what do? They look at a computer. They have all kinds of analytics, right? It's funny. I went to Princeton Engineering once, and all the Princeton kids go to Wall Street. I was like, why would you waste an engineer going to Wall Street? Well, they understand how to use analytics, how to use data in their decision making. That's the kind of jobs we're going to have in the future, where if you're running a manufacturing, and we need to get this down to the shop floor, when you're out there, like how to use the data, how to use the sensors, you know, to get that kind of productivity, to get that efficiency, because that's how we're going to compete. You know, all these jobs are getting much more technical because you're going to be working next to a robot. When that robot doesn't work right, what do you do? When you want to change the efficiency of that process, when you want to speed that injection mold up, you know, how do you know how you can do it? You need data, you need analytics. So I think that is the future. The cost of putting sensors on things has just gotten to nothing. Like, we've got behind us one of the biggest warehouses in the country. We call it Building 10. So we put sensors now on all the rollers so we know when the bearings are wearing, so we can have a very proactive maintenance. Before, it would break and we'd be down for 5 hours. Now we don't go down. Why? Because the sensors are that cheap. We can sit there and literally put them on the rollers on a conveyor track. So I think that's the other thing, is people don't realize how easy it is to do. And then we got to know, what do we do with the data?
Hey, Kevin, we got one last question. We got a panel that's going to be starting here just a little bit here. Someone is asking to share your perspective on the values of certifications and badges, real quick.
Yeah, I think it's good because it's the state. I hope the day when you know, we can really just understand what somebody knows, but that's an easy way to do is, yeah, I've got a certification. It shows that you've had some level of accomplishment and some level of study that we can understand. So I think right now they're very important. I think, you know, you fast forward 20 years from now, I don't know, because, you know, right now I'm involved in learning how to make clocks. It sounds crazy, but I've learned online everything. Now you see there's places I could get a certification in I can't even pronounce it right, but there's a certification that I could go and I could get. Do I need it? I don't know. And so I think 20 years from now, we've all got to look as educators too of, you know, what is it? Is there a different way? I think certain things like blockchain are going to start redefining how we can prove we know something or we don't. Because I think, you know, right now we've got resumes and certificates. I think in the future, there's going to be a way through blockchain to know that, hey, I have that skill. So I think certs are going to change, but you're always going to need some way to show that you have some understanding of something.
Great. Kevin, again, on behalf of ATMAE, thank you so much for taking the time to present with us today. And definitely sorry we couldn't get to meet you personally in Louisville, but hopefully when we're back there in 2 years, we can get to see you. But again,
Yeah, we look forward to that day. And this should be over in 2 years.
right, hopefully we'll be back to somewhat normal. So
Let's hope.
again, Kevin, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, everybody.
All right, and everybody, if you're getting ready, you can head to our next presentation. We've got a great panel session coming up. It's on the working with K-12 teachers and counselors to develop career pathways for advanced manufacturing. So see you online in a little bit.
Thank you.